Stop for a second. A powerful truth about empaths rarely gets talked about. People see empaths as endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly understanding. The kind of people who stay through pain, overlook mistakes, and keep giving chances long after others would walk away. Their kindness looks limitless from the outside. Their compassion seems unbreakable. And that is where the biggest misunderstanding begins. Many people mistake a soft heart for weakness. They mistake understanding for permission. They mistake loyalty for endless tolerance. But hidden beneath all that patience is a line very few people notice until it is already too late. Because empaths rarely explode. They rarely create drama. They rarely announce that they are reaching their limit. Instead, something far more unexpected happens. Something quiet. Something sudden. Something that leaves people shocked and asking one painful question: why did they change? In this video, you will discover the hidden boundary nearly every empath protects, the subtle warning signs most people miss, and the surprising reason empaths can forgive almost everything until one final line gets crossed. Stay until the end because one lesser-known truth changes the entire story. And once you understand it, the behavior of empaths may never look the same again. Welcome to Empath Energy, a place where deep truths meet powerful insight. Subscribe and join us as we uncover the hidden emotional world few people truly understand. Look closer. One of the most powerful and painful traits of an empath is something most people never notice. Empaths excuse things that many others would walk away from immediately. Not because they are blind, not because they are weak, and certainly not because they enjoy being hurt. The reason runs much deeper. Empaths feel pain differently. They do not just see behavior. They look beneath it, beneath the anger, beneath the cold words, beneath the distance. While others focus on actions, empaths often focus on wounds. They sense sadness hidden behind someone's attitude. They recognize pain buried under someone's mistakes. Their hearts naturally search for reasons. Their minds begin creating explanations. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe life is hurting them right now. Maybe they did not mean it. Maybe they are struggling in ways nobody can see. And little by little, understanding becomes a habit. Then that habit becomes sacrifice. Because empaths often give people grace long after the warning signs begin showing. They forgive words that cut deeply. They overlook patterns that repeat. They offer chances that keep increasing. One chance becomes 3. 3 becomes 10. 10 becomes too many to count. Many people never realize how much an empath quietly tolerates. Behind every smile, there can be disappointment. Behind every act of patience, there can be emotional exhaustion. Yet they stay. They keep believing. They keep hoping that love, patience, and understanding can heal pain in another person. But hidden inside this beautiful strength lives a dangerous risk. Because every time an empath explains away hurtful behavior, a small piece of their own pain gets pushed aside. Pay attention to this hidden pattern because this is where many empaths get stuck for far too long. Empaths rarely stay because of who a person is today. They stay because of who they believe that person can become. They see potential where others see patterns. They see the kind version hidden beneath the hurtful one. They remember the sweet moments, the promises, the glimpses of goodness that appeared in between the pain. And that changes everything. While others look at repeated behavior and quietly step away, empaths often hold on to possibility. They tell themselves that people grow, people heal, people change. So instead of focusing on who someone consistently shows themselves to be, they focus on who they once were or who they might still become. That hope keeps them attached longer than they should stay. Because every small act of kindness feels like proof. Every apology feels like progress. Every temporary change feels like a sign that things are finally getting better. But then the cycle returns. The same disappointment, the same hurt, the same emotional exhaustion. Yet empaths keep giving their hearts another reason to believe. And over time, something dangerous begins happening. Patience slowly turns into emotional survival. Loyalty turns into waiting. Hope turns into carrying the weight of someone else's healing journey. Many empaths become trapped in emotional cycles because they keep falling in love with potential instead of reality. They become loyal to a future version of someone while quietly ignoring the person standing right in front of them. And the painful part is this: deep inside, they often feel that something is wrong. Small warning signs begin appearing. Their energy shifts, their excitement fades, their hearts grow tired. Yet they stay silent, because a part of them still believes that one more chance might finally change everything. Notice this shift carefully, because this is where things begin changing in ways most people never see. An empath's loyalty is beautiful, but sometimes that very loyalty creates a quiet danger. People slowly become comfortable with it. Comfortable with the patience. Comfortable with the understanding, comfortable with the fact that no matter how many mistakes happen, the empath still stays. At first there is gratitude. At first there is appreciation. People recognize the effort. They recognize the emotional support, the listening, the endless second chances. But human nature can become strangely familiar with kindness. Over time, repeated forgiveness starts feeling normal. Emotional rescue starts feeling expected. The empath becomes the safe place everyone runs to. The person who understands, the person who fixes, the person who remains steady during chaos. And little by little, something subtle begins to disappear. Appreciation starts fading into assumption. Gratitude slowly turns into expectation. Instead of feeling thankful that the empath stayed, people begin expecting them to stay. Instead of valuing their understanding, they start relying on it without thinking twice. And this is where the deepest imbalance begins. Because empaths rarely ask for much in return. They often give without keeping score. They support without demanding recognition. They love without placing conditions on every act of kindness. But while they continue pouring energy into others, many quietly stop noticing how much the empath is carrying. Fewer thank yous. Less effort, less care, more taking, more expecting, more assuming that the empath will always be there no matter how heavy things become. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface, emotional weight continues building, because even the strongest heart begins feeling tired when loyalty turns into obligation and kindness slowly becomes something people believe they are entitled to receive. Listen closely, because this part often remains invisible to almost everyone around them. Empaths rarely complain the moment they get hurt. They rarely stop everything and announce their pain. Instead, they become quiet carriers of emotional weight. They absorb disappointment in silence. They push aside their own hurt and continue showing up for others. While many people express frustration immediately, empaths often pause and try to understand first. They ask themselves whether they are overreacting. They wonder whether someone else simply needs compassion. They convince themselves to stay patient a little longer. And because of that, their pain does not disappear, it simply moves inward. Every ignored feeling gets stored away. Every moment of disrespect gets buried deeper. Every disappointment becomes another invisible weight added to an already heavy heart. From the outside, nothing looks different. They still smile, they still listen, they still encourage others, they still act strong. That is why people often miss the truth completely. They mistake silence for peace. They mistake patience for immunity. They believe the empath is handling everything just fine. But inside, a very different story is unfolding. Pressure slowly begins building where nobody can see it. Emotional exhaustion quietly grows beneath the surface. Small hurts start connecting with old hurts. New disappointments begin waking up old wounds. The empath keeps carrying more and more while pretending the weight is manageable. Yet deep inside, something starts changing. Their energy feels different. Their excitement becomes harder to find. Their spirit slowly grows tired. Because even the most compassionate people were never meant to endlessly carry emotional pain without being cared for in return. And hidden beneath all that silence, a quiet storm begins forming, one that few people recognize until the first signs finally start appearing. Watch carefully, because this is the stage where many people completely misunderstand an empath. Most expect warning signs to look dramatic. They expect anger, arguments, distance that announces itself loudly, but empaths rarely work that way. Their warning signs often arrive in silence. The empath starts talking less, not because they suddenly stopped caring, but because exhaustion begins replacing effort. They explain less. They stop repeating the same feelings over and over. They stop trying to make someone understand pain that keeps getting overlooked. Little by little, something shifts. Conversations become shorter. Energy becomes quieter. The passion they once poured into fixing things slowly starts fading. And one of the biggest signs often goes unnoticed completely. They stop arguing. They stop defending themselves. At first, many people think this is a good thing. They think finally the problem is over. They think everything is fine now. But usually, everything is far from fine, because an empath arguing often means something important. It means they still care enough to fight for connection. It means they still believe understanding is possible. It means part of them still hopes things can change. Silence tells a different story. Silence can mean emotional withdrawal has already started. Deep inside, the empath may be asking painful questions they never wanted to ask. Questions like, why am I the only one trying? Why am I carrying this alone? Why does understanding always seem to come from my side? And while nobody notices, they slowly begin protecting parts of themselves that once stayed completely open. Less sharing, less vulnerability, less emotional investment. Because after enough disappointment, even the kindest heart begins learning a difficult truth. Endless effort becomes exhausting when care is no longer being returned in the same way. Pay close attention here, because this is the truth many people completely miss. The line an empath refuses to let someone cross is rarely created by one mistake. It is not usually one argument, one disagreement, one bad day. Empaths understand human flaws better than most people. They understand stress. They understand fear. They understand emotional wounds and imperfect moments. They know people say things they regret. They know everyone struggles sometimes. That is exactly why empaths often forgive more than others ever would. They understand that being human means making mistakes. But there is a huge difference between a mistake and a pattern. A mistake brings regret. A pattern keeps repeating. A mistake creates awareness. A pattern creates damage. This is where the real pain begins for an empath. Because repeated disrespect feels different. Repeated disrespect sends a message. It quietly says, your feelings can wait. It says your kindness will always be there. It says your patience has no limits. And over time, the empath begins noticing something painful. The issue was never the individual moments. The issue was the repeated choice. The repeated ignoring, the repeated taking, the repeated hurting after understanding had already been given. That realization cuts deeply because empaths naturally look for the good in people. They search for reasons to stay, reasons to forgive, reasons to believe. But eventually, even the most understanding heart begins seeing a painful truth. Genuine mistakes create growth. Repeated disrespect creates erosion. Piece by piece, trust begins wearing down. Emotional safety begins fading, and deep inside, the empath slowly starts realizing that the pain is no longer coming from human imperfection. The pain is coming from a pattern that keeps asking their heart to survive things it was never meant to endlessly endure. Feel this truth deeply, because this is where many empaths finally reach the place they never wanted to reach. For an empath, one wound cuts deeper than almost any other: betrayal. Not because they expect perfection, not because they believe people never make mistakes, but because trust means something sacred to them. Trust is not casual in the heart of an empath. It is built slowly, carefully, through loyalty, through effort, through countless moments of showing up when nobody else did. Empaths do not just give trust away, they pour pieces of themselves into it. They invest emotionally. They support people through hard seasons. They remain present during difficult moments. They stay when others disappear. They sacrifice energy, time, understanding, and parts of their own emotional well-being because caring deeply feels natural to them. That is why betrayal feels different. It is not only about the action itself, it is about everything surrounding it. It is about the loyalty that came before it, the patience that came before it, the sacrifices that came before it. Because when an empath gives someone their trust, they are quietly saying something powerful. I feel safe enough to place my heart in your hands. And when that trust gets broken, the pain often reaches places words cannot fully describe. Suddenly memories start looking different. Promises start feeling heavier. Moments that once felt meaningful begin carrying questions. The empath starts replaying things in silence, starts wondering whether the connection was ever as genuine as they believed. Because betrayal creates a painful kind of confusion. It shakes the emotional foundation beneath them, and once that foundation begins cracking, something shifts deep inside, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the empath to begin seeing the relationship through completely different eyes. Pause here because this is the moment that changes everything for an empath. Not the argument, not the disappointment, not even the betrayal by itself. The deepest shift begins when a painful realization finally reaches their heart. They begin seeing something they spent a long time trying not to see. Their kindness was no longer being cherished, it was being expected. Their care was no longer being valued, it was becoming convenient. Their loyalty was no longer being respected, it had simply become access. Access to endless patience, access to emotional support, access to understanding without accountability. And that realization hits with a kind of pain that is difficult to explain. Because empaths give from a genuine place. They love deeply because it feels natural. They show up because they care. They keep giving because they believe connection matters. So discovering that their heart became something people relied on without protecting can feel devastating. Suddenly small memories begin connecting together. Times they felt ignored. Times they felt drained. Times they gave more than they received. Moments they brushed aside suddenly return with new meaning. The empath begins noticing patterns they once excused, and slowly a painful truth becomes impossible to ignore. They were carrying relationships that others were simply enjoying. They were investing emotionally while someone else was becoming comfortable receiving. That realization creates a crack deep inside, not because they regret loving, not because they regret caring, but because they realize they slowly disappeared inside the process of constantly being there for everyone else. And once an empath truly sees that their heart has been treated like a resource instead of a gift, something inside becomes quieter. Something becomes more careful, more distant, more protective. Because after enough pain, even the softest hearts begin learning that love should feel appreciated, not endlessly consumed. Watch closely because this next part surprises many people. They expect a breaking point to arrive with anger. They expect raised voices, dramatic exits, or one final emotional explosion. But empaths often leave in a way few people recognize while it is happening. The shift happens quietly. There is no screaming, no revenge, no desperate attempt to make someone feel guilty. Instead, something softer and far more powerful begins taking place. Emotional detachment slowly enters where deep attachment once lived. A calm distance begins forming. The empath still smiles, still responds, still seems present on the surface. But inside, the connection starts becoming lighter, quieter, less attached to outcomes, less attached to fixing things, less attached to saving what they spent so long trying to protect. Because after carrying disappointment for so long, survival begins replacing effort. Silence becomes protection, distance becomes peace. And many people completely misunderstand this stage. They mistake calmness for healing. They mistake less emotion for maturity. They think the empath finally stopped being bothered. But often, the opposite is true. The empath is not becoming less emotional. They are becoming less available to pain. Deep inside, they begin preserving energy they once gave away freely. They stop reaching first, stop over-explaining, stop chasing understanding from people who stopped trying to understand them. And perhaps the saddest part is this. Many people notice the change only after they begin feeling its absence. Suddenly the warmth feels smaller, the effort feels quieter, the emotional presence they once relied on feels farther away. Because once an empath starts emotionally stepping back, it usually means a silent process has already been unfolding for a very long time, one that slowly transformed pain into distance and distance into self-protection. Pay attention to this moment, because many people misunderstand it completely. They think silence means peace. They think less emotion means less pain. They believe that once an empath stops bringing up problems, everything must finally be getting better. But this is often the stage where the deepest shift has already begun. Because empaths explain when they care. They explain because they want connection. They explain because they still believe understanding can repair things. They spend long conversations trying to help others understand their feelings. They repeat themselves not because they enjoy conflict, but because hope is still alive inside them. Every explanation carries effort. Every conversation carries emotional investment. Every attempt to be understood is really another way of saying, "This matters to me." And even arguments can carry love. Strange as it sounds, an empath still arguing often means they are still fighting for the relationship, still fighting for clarity, still fighting for something they believe can be saved. But then a quieter stage arrives. They stop repeating themselves, stop explaining pain that keeps getting ignored. Stop trying to translate emotions for people who never truly listened. The words become fewer, the energy becomes smaller, and many people make a painful mistake at this point. They think the empath finally accepted things. They think the problem disappeared, but often silence is not acceptance. Silence can be emotional surrender. Deep inside, the empath may already be grieving the connection while still physically present, because after enough unheard conversations and enough overlooked feelings, something inside simply becomes tired. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. And once an empath reaches that place, the ending sometimes begins long before anyone else realizes they are slowly watching the distance grow. Look at this carefully, because this is where many people become completely shocked. One day the empath finally steps away, becomes distant, or closes the door for good, and suddenly the people around them feel blindsided. Their first reaction is often the same. That came out of nowhere. Why now? Why so suddenly? From the outside, it can seem like the empath changed overnight. Like one moment everything felt normal and the next moment they were gone emotionally. But for the empath, the goodbye rarely starts on the day they leave. It started long before anyone noticed. It began during the ignored conversations, during the repeated disappointments, during the nights they sat alone carrying feelings they never fully shared. It began during every moment they felt unseen while still trying to understand everyone else. Months earlier, they were already fighting silent battles inside themselves, already questioning things, already feeling pieces of the connection slowly becoming harder to hold on to. But because empaths often suffer quietly, others never see the process happening. They continue showing up, continue caring, continue acting like everything is manageable while privately carrying emotional exhaustion that keeps growing heavier. And little by little, the goodbye starts unfolding inside them. One disappointment at a time, one overlooked feeling at a time, one repeated hurt at a time. Until eventually they reach a place where something inside becomes clear. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, simply out of exhaustion. Because every heart has limits, even deeply compassionate ones, and by the time an empath finally reaches theirs, the decision often feels sudden only to the people who never noticed how long they had already been quietly hurting. Notice the sadness hidden in this truth, because many people only understand an empath's value after the connection is already slipping away. Looking back, they suddenly start seeing things they once overlooked. They remember the patience, the late-night conversations, the constant understanding, the way the empath stayed during difficult seasons when most people would have already walked away. Only then does a painful realization begin settling in. Empaths gave more chances than most people ever would. Far more. They forgave things repeatedly. They overlooked pain repeatedly. They carried emotional weight repeatedly. Not because they lacked boundaries, but because they believed people deserved understanding and room to grow. That is why their departure is rarely impulsive. It is not one emotional reaction, not one sudden decision. It is accumulated pain, quiet pain, hidden pain, pain collected slowly over time until the weight simply becomes too much to keep carrying. And many people never notice the cost while the empath is still there. Presence creates comfort. Consistency creates familiarity. People become so used to the empath showing up that they stop noticing the effort behind it, until suddenly that warmth feels absent. Suddenly the support feels missing. Suddenly the person who once carried so much emotional light no longer feels close in the same way. Then questions begin arriving. Regret begins arriving. Awareness begins arriving. Because absence reveals things comfort often hides. And in that silence, many people finally begin understanding the truth they missed for so long. The empath was never asking for perfection, never asking for endless attention, never asking for impossible things. They were simply asking for care that felt mutual, love that felt valued, and a heart that felt protected instead of endlessly tested. Take a moment and let this truth settle deep inside your heart. Empaths forgive almost everything. They forgive mistakes, they forgive bad days, they forgive human imperfections because they understand something many people forget. Every person carries invisible battles. Every person struggles. Every person falls. Empaths know this better than most. That is why they stay longer, give more chances, love harder. But there is one wound that becomes incredibly difficult for them to forgive. Repeated betrayal of the heart they trusted you with. Not because empaths are weak, not because they are overly sensitive. The truth is much deeper than that. Empaths simply love with their whole heart. They give loyalty fully, they care sincerely, and when they choose someone, they often give pieces of themselves without hesitation. But once they realize their kindness is being used instead of valued, something inside changes forever. They stop fighting for people who stopped protecting them. They stop chasing people who only loved being chased. They stop explaining pain to people who never truly listened. And sometimes, without anger and without noise, they quietly become a person you never get back. So treasure the people who continue showing up with patience, compassion, and genuine love. Hearts like that are rare. And once they grow tired of being taken for granted, silence often says the things words no longer can. If this message connected with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Empath Energy, and become part of this journey with us. And always remember this: the strongest hearts are not the ones that endure endless pain, they are the ones that finally learn they deserve peace too.